Welcome to the Thursday Night's Triumph Over Targeting podcast. I'm your moderator, Ella. Tonight we have another very special guest. Her name is Valerie Guillaume. I'm very happy to have her on this evening. A couple of things. If you're new to the call, please stay on and we will get you some additional support, some TalkShoe podcast numbers, and some helpful links and websites. This is a solutions and educational-based podcast, but the views and opinions of my guests are not necessarily my own personal views and opinions. My goal is that everyone can obtain something out of tonight, especially a feeling of empowerment. If you have any suggestions, comments, questions, or especially if you are in need of additional support, please don't hesitate to email me at tiangel2016@gmail.com. Again, that's tiangel2016@gmail.com. So, Val, again, I want to say thank you so much for coming.
No problem. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And then I guess, we'll go back. I understand. I know you're an author. I know you've worked in fashion. You're a blogger, and you wrote a book. I don't know how many books you wrote, and you're a human rights activist. That's the most important thing, I believe. So is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I want to correct it. I'm not into fashion, but one of my daughters, my younger daughter, is into fashion design.
Yes. Okay.
So I promote her a lot on my Google Plus page, and I also mention her on my blog. So that's probably where you got the little confusion there. But yes, I am an author. I've written and published a few books, mainly children books, but I also have a poetry book that I published before that, and of course I have my blog.
Okay. And so I guess one of the first questions I should ask you is, when did you start to, because I understand you're a targeted individual, when, yes, where, and why do you think you became targeted?
Well, let's see. I started my blog in 2008, but before that, I was kind of going after some local city officials, I'd say, and it had to do with my co-op where I was living in. There was a lot of corruption going on, and I was going after some of them, and I was having them audited, and I saw the response from the local government, how corrupt they were. So that inspired me to expose some of those stuff on my blog, and so that's one of the reasons why I started my blog. And from that, of course, that got me the attention of the government, and because I personally believe that my targeting is coming directly from the government, from the police and from the intelligence agency, CSIS. And in that sense, I'm talking the Canadian government, for those who don't know that I live in Canada.
When you started to realize that something was going on and that, well, what were some of the first signs? I guess I should backtrack just a little bit. What did you notice that kind of signaled to you that something was going on?
Well, like I said, I was getting a lot of harassment from where I was living at the time, and there were a lot of unusual activities, some of which I've later found out from other TIs. There's electronic harassment, noise, not just ordinary noise, just a specific noise, like they would just, carry out noise harassment and attack against me pretty late in the night, and it was intended to, deprive me of sleep, and also just to upset me and to just cause me harm. So you had that, and I also noticed that once I started doing my blog, I was now being put under surveillance by the police openly. I was being followed in their cruisers. They would follow me. They would park across from my apartment, and they would carry out illegal surveillance of me, because on the Canadian law, at some point you have to let the person that you're carrying out the surveillance on know that you're carrying out the surveillance. But that has never happened in all of these years.
Right. And so what was your initial response? How did you react? What did you go online and find information that kind of paralleled your own experiences?
Well, I didn't really call it targeted individual at that time. I didn't call myself that because I didn't know what that was at that time. I just knew that I got the attention, the unwanted attention of the government once I started my blog, once I became a blogger and I started talking about the police and I started talking about local corrupt city officials that I was dealing with on a regular basis. And I just had this in me to expose the corruption that I was seeing, whether it was directed at me personally or that I see happening in society. I just wanted to write about it.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So you wrote about it, and then
I wrote about it on my blog. Yes, I all the time. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't write so frequently now on my blog, but initially I used to write more often.
Oh, I'm sure. It's been years now you've had your blog, so I understand how it kind of ebbs and flows. Who did you reach out to when you realized all this was going on? Who did you reach out for help to?
Actually, as you know, within the targeted community, there really isn't anyone that you can reach out to because part of their program is to isolate you.
Yes.
And so you have this, you basically have to deal with this on your own. As I said, later on in doing more research in regards to targeted individuals, I realized that this is a common tactic, isolating the target and just carrying out all kinds of attacks against them. So there wasn't anyone that I could turn to that would understand my situation as far as family or friends or anyone like that.
So what about officials? I mean, I know you're not supposed to, but did you even try? Because initially I went to the FBI, I went to the police, I actually did in the beginning try to get help.
No, because as I said, I'm one of those people that believe that, the targeting is coming from the government directly. For instance, when it first started, and I would try to take legal actions against some of the people that were carrying it out, and this was being done by the management of my co-op. And so there were times when I took them to court and tried to lay charges, and the charges were being blocked, and I couldn't get anywhere. So I could just see the conspiracy involving the courts and involving the people who were carrying this out, and it was just a big conspiracy. So, no, I couldn't go to the authorities at all.
Yeah, I think because I was always trying to find an individual, thinking that talking to an individual might help, and trying to get people. But, it was a little different. So I can see your hesitancy, knowing that it's the government right away. But still, even when the government's involved, sometimes I think you might be able to reach out to an individual who's not. And I think that's kind of like my thought.
It wasn't just the government. The government were part of it. It was also being the gang stalking and the targeting was also being carried out by these very rich people. Like for instance, the company that managed my co-op, they would get people in the building to target me. And they would carry out targeting in that way. And when I mentioned taking them to court, those are the people that I was taking to court, the people who were actually managing my co-op, and even some city officials that were linked to them. So, but they were behind the targeting in the building because obviously they viewed me as a troublemaker. I was a member of the co-op, but they viewed me as a troublemaker because I was, in their view, stirring up a lot of trouble with them, pointing out, things that they were doing that they shouldn't be doing. And so when I said that the targeting is coming from the government, they're part of it, but it's not 100% coming from the government, at least not initially.
Mm-hmm.
So there were regular people that were carrying out gang stalking, and it's similar to other situations that I've read about. People would pass by my apartment and punch the wall, or they would take a hammer and just bang, 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 or, electronic harassment. I will give you one example. I remember at one time I called the police in regards to some of the stuff that was going on in regards to the harassment, and I was watching on the monitor, and I saw the two police enter the building, and I thought they were just going to come directly to see me, but they didn't do that. What they did was they went upstairs, and all of the harassment continued, and they didn't know that I was watching them. And so I called back the division, and I said, was there another call to this building? Because, I saw the police came and they didn't come to me, and this is still going on. And they said, no, yours was the only call that came to us, so no, they're not there to see anyone else. I said, well, they haven't come to see me yet, and I'm still going through this. So I think what happened is that they went upstairs and they just joined what was going on up there. And if you know my relationship with the police and talking about them and exposing some of the stuff that they've been doing, it's not surprising that they would do that.
Yeah, not at all. It doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
So there's not really, you're kind of doing this all on your own. Have you worked with other activists?
Yes, I have, but I haven't joined other groups or things like that, but I do know other activists, and they've given me some of their support and things like that. But as far as my activism, most of it is online through my blog.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a really great one too. How do you protect your family? Are they aware on any level of what's going on? I mean, of course you have a blog, so they know some of it. Do they know the full extent?
As far as my family, I have 3 grown children, and they're out there living their lives, and I've seen some stuff like, as I mentioned to you earlier, my younger daughter that does the fashion design, not me, and I noticed that her view counts are blocked on YouTube because they do that a lot with me, and in my case they do that to demoralize me. To make it look as if no one is watching my videos or, things like that, but I noticed the same thing happening to her, and I noticed, little things that I noticed, maybe as a mother,
Right.
But the full extent of it, I'm not aware. They haven't said anything to me that they're experiencing anything similar to what I've gone through.
Right. Okay,
yeah.
I see. What shielding do you use, and what kind of precautionary measures do you take?
Well, none really. If the attack gets too much, then I will write about it, and I'm not shy about naming names. So they kind of know how far that they want to go with me, because I will just if I think. If I think something is happening and it's coming from a particular person, I will just go and write about it, and I will name names. So they don't want to have this exposed. Even the people that they use, a lot of time neighbors or, people who are in your immediate vicinity, if they use those people, it's all secretive. This is a secretive operation that they're carrying out. So giving them exposure, that's the last thing that they want.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And so since you've been in the community for a while, what changes have you seen during this time as far as kind of the momentum of the movement, and I just want to know your observations, what you think of what's going on right now, and what you've seen evolve or devolve, and whatever your opinion may be, as far as exposing this program.
Well, I've seen that there's a lot more people who are aware of what's going on. There's a lot of information out there on the internet. There are shows like yours. that you have a lot of distinguished guests on your shows, and they talk about what's really happening. A lot of whistleblowers, a lot of people who are professionals who are aware that a lot of this is coming directly from the government, whichever government it is, and that people are not making it up. But at the same time, there are some people out there that, I just can't tell where they're coming from with this targeting. But the majority of people who say they're being targeted, they should be believed.
Yes, I agree so much. Okay, so then let's see what else we can discuss here. What do you think is being success? What do you think is helping with the movement? You mentioned the shows, and what about letter writing? Does that seem to work? Do you get any responses at all from letter writing? Do you find that to be a way to handle this, or to go about trying to expose this? What's your opinions? What can we do as targeted individuals to kind of get the word out? In your opinion?
I think as targeted individuals, we need to come together and to get the information out. Because, as I said, one of the main thing about this community is isolation. So targeted individuals, each of them are isolated. They're isolated from each other. They're isolated from, the society at large because of the things that they go through. So what I would like to see is more of a, I know there's a lot of organizations out there already, a lot of groups out there in regards to targeted individuals, but there isn't, at least I haven't seen any that has that kind of clout that can take it a step further and say, get more protection for targeted individuals as far as taking legal actions that are necessary. Because the things that are happening to targeted individuals are very real. They're being harmed in a lot of ways, whether physically or psychologically, and in many cases they don't have anywhere to turn. They either have to deal with this on their own and try to, take the routes that are available to them, and a lot of times they don't get anywhere. But what I do see happening now is that there are a lot of more professional people coming out and giving more credibility to it.
Oh, I agree.
So, yes, more credibility to it. So based on that, there is a possibility in the near future that, more action can be done to help the targeted community.
And I think part of that might be, Val, and I mean, I analyze things a little bit too much, but I'm wondering if, because there's a little more of a platform now for targeted individuals and we're not completely laughed at, although there's still that, these people seem a little bit mentally unstable, there's still this natural curiosity now. I'm wondering if, because of the people who are speaking out are a little more credible, so people are feeling as if people who have jobs to worry about and things like that, I think they're feeling a little more confident in about coming forward and sharing what's going on with them. I think before, maybe 10 years ago, it might have been hard for a person who has credentials and professional background to maybe speak out, because it sounds like to me from, speaking with long-term activists that they didn't have the terminology and nobody, there was an educational process that occurred in the past decade or so, and so people can now come across more unified, at least. It's still, from my opinion, it seems still very across the board, but so maybe just because there's a more confidence in what's going on a little bit more, I think maybe people are feeling like it's okay to speak out. Look, these other credible people are speaking out. Bill Binney is even going to bat for us. So I think with people doing that, it's going to get more and more people that are not, maybe didn't come forward, didn't speak up. Maybe more people will feel a little more confident now because they're not, it's being viewed at a little differently. Of course, there's that splitting, where there are people that think it's just a bunch of mentally unstable people collaborate. But I also think when I talk to people and when I'm out, now that I have the language, because when I first tried to explain this to people, people thought there was something wrong with me. But now that I have the verbiage and I've had a good education and I go out with people like Terry Brewer and even speaking with Matthew, Aaron, and different people like that, you can speak with confidence, and people believe us. I remember working with a gentleman who was doing activism, and I was making phone calls trying to get him on radio shows and different things like that, and everybody believed us. It was just amazing because there is the knowledge base, a shared knowledge base, and there's some evidence too. There's things to back up what we're saying. There's affidavits.
Sorry. It's not. Sorry to cut you. It's not just the knowledge base. It's the fact that more and more people are coming out. It's happening to more and more people. That's what's happening. So, but personally, I would like to see it go a step further than that, because this is a gross human rights abuse that's being carried out against the population. This is what's happening. So, personally, I would like to see the human rights governing bodies that are out there, whether it's the UN or the courts or whatever, deal with this matter, because it's a crime. It's a crime that's being perpetrated against citizens, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't. It's a crime. So the people who are coming out now, the professionals who are coming out now, these are people who have a conscience and say, well, this is happening, it shouldn't be happening. But I want to see go a step further than that. I want to see actions taken that would protect the targeted individual community. Mm-hmm. And in order for that to happen, we have to have some kind of strong forces back in this community. Because right now it's still being regarded as people who are delusional and have mental issues and things like that, when it's a very, very real problem. It's crimes that's being committed against them. And in my view, as you already know, this is coming from the government. This is not just gang stalking by individual, because even if it's a group of individuals, most of the time they're being recruited by authorities. Yes. And people don't connect the link. People think it's just some people that wants to get to you. It's too organized for that. Mm-hmm. It's too organized for that. And the stories that are coming out in regards to the injury that some people have, regular people don't have the means to do that. It has to be coming from the government, the military, the police, the intelligence agency. They're the ones who are behind it.
Yeah, that seems to be, a majority of people believe that in the community. But it is hard. It really is hard when you don't have absolute evidence. But in your case, it's more obvious. But in other cases, you wonder.
Ella, we do have evidence. The technology that they're using against the population, like microwave energy technology, voice to skull. Where would the average person get that from? Where would they get that technology from? Obviously, that's coming from the government, these black operations that they're carrying out against the population to see basically how they would respond or how far they can go with it. Like, we're just like guinea pigs.
Right. Yeah,
without any protection, really.
Right. I always just wondered and suspected that maybe on the black market, some of this might be available, but I could be wrong.
If you have the means to get it, if you have the means to get it, but the average person do not. So I can't point the finger at them. Right?
It wouldn't be typical. It would be people in a powerful position or have connections.
Exactly. That's what I mean, yes. If you have the means to get it, yes. Okay. And then they now go and they recruit their foot soldiers to carry out these attacks, but the focus shouldn't be on the people, the perps who are carrying out the attack. The focus should be on the people who are hiring them to carry out those attacks.
Yeah.
It's very well organized.
Well, I hope you don't mind. There is a gentleman who I mentioned earlier who is from Canada, and we had a discussion before you coming on. Would you mind? Would you like to take questions from the audience?
Yes, I don't mind.
Okay, great. And this is a man I work with. We have the organization. He's kind of the person who came up with Freedom for Targeted Individuals, the organization. And, again, he's a fellow Canadian. So he knows a lot of it.
You mentioned he was from Vancouver?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Here he is. Hold on just a moment. Hi, Matthew.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Ella, how well do you know me? I am not Canadian. I lived in Vancouver, but I am a U.S. citizen.
I know that, but you still live there. You're an American Canadian.
I guess becoming a Canadian is very easy, right?
I guess so.
Hi, Valerie. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, I don't mind. This is a good show. It's very educational, and Ella, I said this to her before the show started, that she's doing such a great job in, bringing awareness to what's going on in the targeted individual community, the TI community.
Yes. I would also like to thank you for your blog posts and video posts. When I had fled Canada back to the U.S. and was trying to sort things out and figure out how I was going to try to document what happened, I saw some of your postings, and there was one posting in particular where you were asking other victims in Canada to reach out to you. I tried to do it at the time, but I think you were maybe swamped with email or something. So it's nice to finally talk to you.
Yeah.
I will tell you briefly, just a brief synopsis. I was targeted in Vancouver because of the proximity of my apartment to 1190 Hornby Street, which is a medical building where I saw essentially a large group of people engaging in harassment of all kinds of downtown residents, and some of the harassment was coming my way, but I don't think I was particularly targeted at first until I confronted those people. And then the targeting ramped up, and yes, some Vancouver police participated in the targeting, and that's why your video was so meaningful to me, because you were talking about the police also doing that to you, and also some paramedics with Providence Healthcare. And it turned out that the HR department for Providence Healthcare in Vancouver is located in that same medical building where I saw people partying and using harassment techniques and devices. I witnessed this all hours of the night in this non-residential building, which actually happens to be contiguous with one of the downtown offices of Immigration Canada. I'm not sure if there's a connection there, but in any case, I wanted to...
Can I ask a question? How long have you been targeted for? How long has this been going on?
The targeting started the day I moved into that apartment, and the targeting ended the day that I fled Vancouver. So in my case, it did not follow me. I mean, they followed me across the border for sure. They followed me all the way to my destination in Seattle. But that night, because I had assistance from my family, and they didn't. I mean, my cousins, they didn't fully understand what was happening, but they helped me go underground essentially. And so from that night, I have not been targeted since then. So it started in 2013.
It sounds to me like you had just one incident of targeting. Am I correct? With that particular group of people, was it just one incident that you had, or is it a long-standing issue with you?
No, it was one very prolonged and intense incident. So it went on for 2 years at a very low level in that apartment. But then when I confronted them, then it was they pulled the curtain back, and that's when I saw the extent of the harassment network in Vancouver. And that's when they pulled out I still think they did potentially near lethal attacks on me. And so for 6 weeks then I was hit with directed energy nonstop wherever I went in Vancouver, and it was a situation that forced me to abandon everything. I felt I had no choice, but I did manage to remove some, what I think will become very significant physical evidence from my apartment. I think my apartment was rigged up, and I just happened to move into the wrong apartment, which was essentially, this is my belief, my allegation, my conclusion is that basically I moved into an apartment that was right across the alley from essentially a center of this harassment, where the gang stalkers kind of were managed essentially in 1190 Hornby Street, right in downtown Vancouver. So it was one bout of targeting, but it was 2.5 years, and the last 6 weeks of it was enough to force me. I think I'm a strong, courageous, and person who can stand up to a lot, and I had to flee for my life in those situations.
Were you able to identify the group or the people in the group and maybe say try to take legal actions against them, or did you just?
I do know some of the people. I have photographs. I have some very compelling evidence. And when the harassment network was turned on me big time, it turned out that some people that I knew as friends even were participating in this harassment. So, as you know, legal action is still difficult in the climate that we're in. But I would like to let you know, because you are Canadian, and I will give you the details. I assume you and Ella are in email contact?
We have our contact. I have our contact, and she has mine, yes.
Okay, so I'll just say in general terms right now that after I left Canada, and I documented everything that happened to me in a long report, and I sent that to officials in Canada, and then I came to find out. I just happened to, through contacts, get in touch with someone who is from British Columbia, and she has independently organized a class action lawsuit for people who were targeted in Canada. And this is not, many people talk about different legal actions, and I have to say, among TI legal actions, this is one of the best and most powerful that I know of, and this person has high integrity, and she's very trustworthy, and she has some members of Parliament and the Attorney General's office are taking an interest in this situation, and even a former Deputy Prime Minister, and so I would like to put you in touch with her, and I would.
What's her name?
Her name. I'll just tell you her first name. I'm not sure how much she wants. Her first name is Mary.
Mary. Well, if she started a class action, that means there's nothing more private about it anymore. It's now part of the court records, right? So it's.
Well, I think
very private though. It's maybe because I don't know. She just seems very private.
No,
but I think Val, you would. I just have the utmost respect for her. She's an author as well. I think you guys.
Well, let me just answer. You're correct, but
This is something that I would like to know more about. Maybe write about it on my blog, because that would be doing a helpful job for the TI community. If someone actually taking a class action lawsuit against.
Right. Oh, yeah. So but let me just say this, that this is in the early stages. This is a long process. It's in the early stages of being formed, which is why I don't think there are no court records yet. But the promising thing is that what I have heard is that the Attorney General's office is assigning a lawyer to help the plaintiff's TIs. So it has a very promising movement, and I will send you information on this through Ella, and I'll put you in touch with that person. And I'm just going to also encourage you to consider joining and adding your own affidavit to the lawsuit.
I'm looking forward to getting the information from you. It sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that you mentioned the Attorney General is, showed an interest in that, because usually government officials don't even recognize the TI community. Like, who are these people? So I'm really looking forward to seeing some kind of documentation on what's happening in regards to what this woman is doing.
Right, and I think it'd be best for her to communicate that directly with you. But my impression is that this kind of crime is being facilitated by people that are misusing government positions and criminal elements in the government. But there are also a lot of people in government who care about society and rights who don't know about this. So it's secretive and patchy. Even in the government elements that are facilitating it are only corrupt elements in my view. So there are good people that we can get on our side.
Of course. That's why there are so many whistleblowers coming out now and talking about it and sharing their information with the general public and saying, I know this is happening because, I worked here and I know I know these black operations and that it's being funded by the government and things like that. So, yeah, it's good when we see people from the government, within the government, or in high position coming out and, talking about what's happening, what's involved.
Yes, and the last thing I want to say about it is that I think she's taking a very intelligent approach, and that is because it's so hard to go after the actual perpetrators. The strategy of this suit is to focus on pointing the finger at the police for not assisting people when they go, because even in my case, when I had to call for the police, when I was literally chased with a van that had a very dangerous basically radiation weapon in the back of it, and they chased me and they incapacitated me, and I called for the police. Guess what happened? And they didn't even listen to my story. They put me straight into a psychiatric hospital, which is what crystallized my feeling of violation and anger. And in that moment, I said, I will never, ever stop fighting against this.
They are the authorities, and every time you approach the authorities, whether it's the police or the court, you have to have some kind of evidence, otherwise they don't listen. They only move on evidence, right? So a lot of times the evidence that the targeted individual has, they either ignore it or they don't think it's sufficient to move with, whether through the courts or whatever. As I mentioned to Ella earlier, when the targeting first started with me, I had gone through the courts. I'd gone to the JP's office numerous times to lay charges against the people that were carrying it out, and it got nowhere, absolutely nowhere, because they needed more evidence.
Right.
So I'm saying it's one thing to say that this is happening to me and things like that, and you may have some evidence, but it a lot of time it's not sufficient to really get these people legally, whether to sue them or charge them or anything like that.
Right. This particular case was me not approaching the police in any kind of a standard way. I was pinned down and fearing for my life, which is why, the perpetrators were there in the distance, in this park. It was, and I was just calling for the police because I was in fear of my life at the time. But so they basically they staged that. That's how they wanted it to play out. But I would just encourage you, when I pass this information on, just get in touch with Mary, and then you can have a chat with her and see, get more direct information about this legal action. And there is some sign that some people in the federal government are taking an interest. Maybe the issue has grown to a point where it's big enough that it's becoming an uncomfortable issue for them.
Yeah, you know what? I have to disagree. I haven't seen that because I still write about the corruption that I see happening in this country. There may be some people in the government, as anywhere else, who are good people, and I've seen a few myself. But generally speaking, there's a lot of corruption going on within this government, as it in Ella's country. It's just something that it's an abuse of power. It's some people want to call it police state, whatever. It's the government having this power over the people and carrying out actions against them, against their will, and it's secretive, it's illegal, and unfortunately, it's going to take a lot to solve this. But the main issue is the corruption and the cover-up.
Right. I have no disagreement with that. But anyway, I think it's worth for you to at least get in touch with Mary and see what she has to say, because she can explain better. She knows more about what's going on.
Yes, I would definitely like to speak with her, especially from a writer's point of view, not necessarily that she can help me, because I think you mentioned that she's on the West Coast, and I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Ontario. So there's like a jurisdiction issue there, So maybe she can help the people out there. That would be good. I would love to speak with her.
Yeah,
okay,
I think
okay.
Yeah, just as a person, just a person to maybe connect with. I could see that you would enjoy knowing her. She's just a really wonderful person. Lovely, yeah. Regardless
okay,
of
well,
Definitely.
Thank you again, Valerie. It's great. I'm glad that you came on the call. And thank you, Ella.
Thanks, Matthew. Okay. Do you have any questions, Matthew? And do you want to ask her a question?
No, I think other people can ask. I just wanted to say hi and pass on that information, but I'll just listen to the other questions.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the information, Matthew.
Okay.
We'll
Thank you.
follow up on it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Valerie.
Have a good night.
Okay, so *8, and so what's going to happen when you *8? It's going to notify me that you'd like to speak, and so when I get to you, you will hear a prompt letting you know that you're being unmuted. So when you *8, you're not immediately unmuted. You'll just have to wait for me to come to you, and as I said, you'll hear a prompt, and you'll know.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to start from the top, and let's see, *8. If you have a question for Val.
I started my blog in 2008, but before that, I was kind of going after some local city officials, I'd say, and it had to do with my co-op where I was living in. There was a lot of corruption going on, and I was going after some of them, and I was having them audited, and I saw the response from the local government, how corrupt they were. So that inspired me to expose some of those stuff on my blog, and so that's one of the reasons why I started my blog. And from that, of course, that got me the attention of the government, and because I personally believe that my targeting is coming directly from the government, from the police, and from the intelligence.
And you wrote a book. I don't know how many books you wrote, and you're a human rights activist. That's the most important thing, I believe. So is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well, I want to correct it. I'm not into fashion, but one of my daughters, my younger daughter, is into fashion design.
Okay.
So I promote her a lot on my Google Plus page, and I also mention her on my blog. So that's probably where you got the little confusion there. But yes, I am an author. I've written and published a few books. mainly children books, but I also have a poetry book that I published before that. And, of course, I have my blog.
Okay. And so I guess one of the first questions I should ask you is, when did you start to, because I understand you're a targeted individual, when,
Yes.
where, and why do you think you became targeted?
Well, it's me and to just cause me harm. So you had that, and I also noticed that once I started doing my blog, I was now being put under surveillance by the police openly. I was being followed in their cruisers. They would follow me. They would park across from my apartment, and they would carry out illegal surveillance of me. Because under Canadian law, at some point you have to let the person that you're carrying out the surveillance on know that you're carrying out the surveillance. But that has never happened in all of these years.
Right. And so what was your initial response? How did you react? What did you go online and find information that kind of paralleled your own experiences?
Well, I didn't really call it targeted individual at that time. I didn't call myself that because I didn't know what that was at that time. I just knew that I didn't agency thesis. And in that sense, I'm talking the Canadian government, for those who don't know that I live in Canada.
When you started to realize that something was going on and that, well, what were some of the first signs? I guess I should backtrack just a little bit. What did you notice that kind of signaled to you that something was going on?
Well, like I said, I was getting a lot of harassment from where I was living at the time, and there were a lot of unusual activities, some of which I've later found out from other TIs. There's electronic harassment, noise, not just ordinary noise, just a specific noise. Like they would just carry out noise. Harassment and attack against me pretty late in the night, and it was intended to, deprive me of sleep, and also just to upset.
Welcome to the Thursday Night's Time for Over-Targeting podcast. I'm your moderator, Ella. Tonight we have another very special guest. Her name is Valerie Guillaume. I'm very happy to have her on this evening. A couple of things. If you're new to the call, please stay on, and we will get you some additional support, some TalkShoe podcast numbers, and some helpful links and websites. This is a solutions and educational-based podcast, but the views and opinions of my guests are not necessarily my own personal views and opinions. My goal is that everyone can obtain something out of tonight, especially a feeling of empowerment. If you have any suggestions, comments, questions, or especially if you are in need of additional support, please don't hesitate to email me at tiangel2016@gmail.com. Again, that's tiangel2016@gmail.com. So, Val, again, I want to say thank you so much for coming.
No problem. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And then I guess, we'll go back. I understand. I know you're an author. I know you've worked in fashion. You're a blogger.